Hi, guys. Welcome back to Aclaimant Fireside Chats. I am super excited today to be joined by Eddie Woda of National Church Residences. Eddie, welcome to Aclaimant Fireside Chats.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We always kick off these conversations mapping the wonderful journey everybody takes into risk management. And I can honestly say yours is probably the most interesting and atypical that I've ever seen. Just to make sure I got this right, you were in the state assembly, and then you were in the New York fire department, and then you were at the Columbus Library, and then naturally the next step in everyone's career is to go to National Church as the director of risk management. Is that a pretty fair representation?
Everybody charts their own path in this life. Yeah, I started out working in government for 15 years. My first job, like I said, was with the New York State Assembly. I worked for a member of the legislature from the Bronx, and that was a very interesting experience that I had. It was great to do it and to be there when I was. And then I left in 2010 to work for the New York City Fire Department. I worked in our disaster preparedness. I worked on a project that was a direct response to communications failures during 9/11.
Yep.
So it was about just the continuity of command and incident management and things like that. So that kind of gave me a background in some of the maintaining situational awareness and understanding risk and understanding things that were occurring in our immediate environment. And then I started working in procurement for the fire department, which is where I learned my trade that I do most of the time. And I worked in that for 6 years at the fire department, where I bought just about everything you could think of, in addition to maintaining the buildings and operations for our 275 facilities that run 24 hours a day and respond to 1 million calls a year throughout the city. I got a really healthy dose of real life experience in how to manage a crisis, which was really good. I don't try to take credit at all for the first responders. They're the ones who were running at the burning buildings. I was in no way doing that, but it was helpful and very rewarding to know we gave them the tools to do those kinds of things so that they could keep the 9 million people of New York safe and that we could keep them safe doing it. So I did that, and then my wife and I decided to become Buckeyes full time. My wife is originally from Columbus, Ohio, and so I'm a Buckeye by marriage, and we
Okay.
relocated out here, and she got a role and I followed, and I came out as the procurement manager for the Columbus Libraries, where I oversaw the procurement and the contract administration for the 24 branches of the library, 23 branches plus the main library and a distribution center downtown. And then I was recruited into this role where I became a jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife for National Church Residences, in which I inherited our insurance program and that relationship, which led me to the wonderful world of risk management. And I've been very lucky with the opportunities that we've been given here, and especially with learning about how data driven this industry is now. And it's always been something of mine to say, what are we doing? Can we do it better? And not floating around in a black box, operating on assumptions and anecdotal stories, and really leaning into quantitative data. And that's something that I think is going to be the skill set of our time, is learning how to use data to inform decision making. And that's what I try to do in my role as a risk management professional. Got here.
Perfect. No, that's it's very cool. And it's funny. I can actually like hearing the story tell back, I can actually start to see some of the early dots that kind of tied everything together, even though on paper it looks a little bit just like you've had a heck of a career. As a random aside, I am curious, what's the strangest thing that you had to buy as the procurement director at the New York fire department? I have to imagine there's just so many things that come in there. I can't even imagine what's on that list.
So one thing people who go to New York for a visit don't realize that it's a bunch of islands. And you have Manhattan, Staten Island, and then so there's a lot of coastline. So the New York City Fire Department actually runs 33 boats, and I got to buy lots of fireboats, which were
Okay.
really an interesting thing to purchase. Just you think about trucks and things like that, but there's actually a lot of shipyard fires, a lot of marina fires, a lot of water-based fires, and also what water, like where water comes from, especially when you're surrounded by it. So
Yeah.
for example, there was a fire once at a document storage facility. Most of us were trying to go paperless, but you still got to keep stuff around. So there was a fire at a facility that did offsite storage. So if you imagine it's a building full of paper. So there was a fire at one of those buildings, and they actually couldn't control it based on the water pressure of the hydrants in the area. So they actually brought in boats and were shooting water from the river at the building. And they were the boats that like we bought because they just had to keep up with so much water because it was literally a big building filled with paper that wouldn't stop burning.
Very cool. That's awesome. I'm sure there's the number of
I've got
stories. I'm sure. Yeah,
stories.
I
I
bet.
could go on with this forever.
So I guess fast forwarding to National Church. So you guys obviously you're overseeing a lot of different things with a kind of very diverse background, but maybe for context here, could we get maybe first the 2 second just roughly of the size and scope and
Sure.
function of National Church? And then second, talk to me for a second about what are your high priority items? What are your main focus areas for the risk management group at National Church Residences?
National Church Residences is the largest not-for-profit provider of senior affordable housing in the United States. So we have 23,000 apartment units spread across 23 states, primarily in the Midwest and the upper Midwest. We have mostly Ohio, Michigan, but then we have large concentrations of communities in the Atlanta area, spread throughout different parts of Texas, El Paso, Lubbock, San Antonio, Houston. We also have pockets in Florida, pockets in upstate New York, but generally that's what we do. We serve low-income seniors. It's all subsidized housing, and every dollar we spend on losses to replace property damage is a dollar we're not spending on our mission. We really want to provide dignified, clean, reliable housing because it is one of the social determinants of health is stable housing for people. And we want to keep seniors to age in place, age where they want to be, and provide them with a great place to live. I was brought in looking at our insurance program saying, these costs keep going up. We keep spending more money because we keep having all these losses. Our carriers are looking at us and saying, hey, this is a really risky enterprise, and there's no way that we can underwrite this risk at this price. And we said something's got to give. So we worked and we noticed a lot of our data was all over the place. All we had was stuff in our loss runs, or we had anecdotal reports. Nothing was centralized. A lot of things were on paper. We couldn't really see anything that was happening in any kind of consistent way. So trying to bring order to the chaos of where are our areas of risk instead of saying, hey, we know we have a lot of things going on, as opposed to, we know we have a problem with water. We know we have a problem with fire or theft or whatever it may be, and trying to pinpoint these areas and doing it in a way that we've been pretty consistent as a team that this is not a naming and shaming exercise. The whole point is to really understand what's going on to figure out where targeted interventions may be. So we're really trying to, again, use the data that our communities are telling us and also being judicious of what information we're sharing with our insurers and what information we're keeping in-house just to say, hey, something happened, we should know about it, versus, hey, something happened, we need to open up an insurance claim. So trying to build a process around what we need and what we're doing has been our priority, and also to try to provide support to our employees based on what's actually happening, not what we think is actually happening.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think you hit on some of the things that we always think about in this space, which is you got to get the data because the data gives you the answers, but the data by itself is just data. You need to have a culture that encourages getting the data and a process and a culture that make sure you can actually do stuff with it, which is great. We've seen, and it sounds like you're in a similar spot to many people, that like things can go unmanaged for only so long before something breaks. It's always like one straw, one thing. And then your approach, I think, has been exciting to hear. So I guess maybe it's a good transition point. We know you've been an Aclaimant partner for a long time. I guess talk me through a little bit of if you were kind of either part of the process or stepped in, like how a system like Aclaimant kind of lined up with kind of the goals you were trying to achieve and what your experience has been.
Sure, yeah. I worked with our broker a brokerage partner and said, we want to look at a risk management information system. What do you recommend? And they brought us a number of them, and we sat through a bunch of demos. And we really liked the workflow-based system where we'd have different layers of notifications, different layers of data access, and how everything was baked into one system, because we had one system for reporting one type of claims, one system for reporting another type of claims, and they were all paper. They all went to different places. So what we didn't want, and what I didn't want, because I'd lived through some of these in the past, of saying, this is the piece of paper, just make this piece of paper into your computer. I didn't want that. I
Yeah.
believe I've been through enough system transitions where you could say, I believe in the 80-20 rule when it comes to these things. Like, it should accomplish 80% out of the box, and then you have to be willing to change 20% of your business processes. That's my guiding light when it comes to off-the-shelf software integrations, and this really fit that bill. It really did most of what we wanted, and it forced us to question, to say, do we really need that? Do we really need this information? Does this person really need to know? Is this really important? Like, how important are these things that we have to decide? And I felt like it was a good amount of stuff that worked right away, exactly the way that we needed it to. And that was really what made the decision for me.
Awesome. And I think that's one of the things we always ask is kind of what advice would you have for someone who's coming next? And I think you jumped the question on me, which is great. But I think the 80-20 philosophy, I haven't heard used in this context before, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's my standard advice for all off-the-shelf integrations, and you can feel free to steal it. Because again, I think that I don't want consolidated maintenance contracts on a proprietary system. That doesn't work. It just doesn't. It doesn't work long term. And I want to make sure that we have a good vendor partner that is scalable, that is somebody that, we can grow with and is receptive. And we've had a really great relationship manager with Aclaimant who has said, that's a good idea. We should bring that to our developers to integrate into subsequent builds, and have seen progress in that front as well.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think that's transitioning to the next part of the conversation very well, which is the reason why you chose Acclaimant and also the driving forces to figure out what your priorities are. Next question is always, okay, where are you going next? And how does technology fit into that priority? So maybe if we can frame out the next part of the conversation, the direct question would be, what are you thinking about next in terms of your focus areas for the next couple of years? And where does your technology fit into that approach?
I think for us is being able to extract from the data that we have relevant information to drive decision making. So, for example, we have one of our largest loss categories in this year, oddly, have been vehicle impacts.
Okay.
So Columbus, Ohio has pretty bad drivers. I didn't realize that, but we've had a number of communities that have been hit by cars, people jumping off the road, distracted drivers, things like that. Another big part in that same category are delivery trucks. You've had a lot people get packages, different things, and they whip it in and whip it out. And for us, when we build new buildings, we renovate our communities to say, hey, you shouldn't build awnings over the front of buildings on driveways because they just keep getting hit by trucks. And that's just not something that, from a design standpoint, we keep paying to fix something that keeps getting broken because the world has changed. So that's just like a small example of like other things. But then we've seen from our insurers about climate risk. What's our exposure if we continue to expand our footprint in parts of the country that are more prone to hail or hurricanes or tornadoes or things like that? So I think being able to say, yes, the risk should not be a reason not to do something, right? Or a reason to do something. But it should absolutely be a voice in the conversation to say, be aware of what you're getting yourself into. So that may inform the long-term decisions of the organization. So I think trying to make this as a relevant data point in decision making within our organization is the a really is the goal that I'm trying to fulfill.
Amazing. No, I think that's brilliant. It's even just I think driving towards like specific insights that can drive specific actions or specific decisions, I think is always the holy grail of this kind of like space. And so having a clear vision and also being able to articulate it, I think is something that everyone strives for. Even that we put awnings in front of the buildings that get hit, let's just not do that. Makes great sense. I think that people being have the data to see that, and then the insight to say, let's investigate why. Oh yeah, let's just get rid of the awnings there. Nothing gets hit. Nothing needs to be fixed. And what do you know? Piece of
Right.
cake.
Again, not to cast aspersions, but I don't think drivers just keep on driving. Like you've got, they hit something and they keep on going.
Yes. So I guess maybe for the last part of the conversation here, one last opportunity. Maybe give us just the quick pitch on national church residences. I know you got to give us the overview before, but one chance for kind of a shameless plug, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up.
Again, National Church Residences has a number of business lines. Our primary work is affordable housing. However, our goal is to serve 100,000 seniors by 2030, and we have a lot of ways in which we intend on doing that. We are one of the top 5 operators of senior living, which is, we can call that assisted living, independent living, skilled nursing in Ohio. We do in-home primary care for our residents. We do hospice, we do rehabilitation, palliative care, we do journey called care navigation. So if you're an individual who's got a parent or yourself who's looking to say, hey, I'm entering this pipeline, where do I go? We have people who sit down, work with you. And even though we have church in our name, it's not affiliated with any direct religious organization. We do have a very large chaplaincy program to support our residents and families. But again, we are here to provide housing and support to seniors wherever they call home. And we're very proud of doing that. And as of, I believe, earlier this year, we hit 70,000 seniors that we're serving. So we have 30,000 to go over the next 4 years. And we're doing that through expansion of our physical footprint and our healthcare services throughout Central Ohio in general, and hopefully elsewhere. But we'll stay tuned on what those expansions may look like.
Awesome. Eddie, this has been both a ton of fun, but also super insightful. Really appreciate you taking the time and for being a great partner to Aclaimant over these years. So with that, we'll say thanks, everybody, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.